Since you're talking about the fortunes in the 2020 elections, let's bring that up, because in the lead up to that internal race, we saw some sort of shocking revelations coming up with regard to how the NDC managed the 2020 election figures, for instance. You're in charge of research. Is it the case that the NDC was clueless absolutely about what it is that your figures were, what you had after the 2020 general elections?
We were never clueless. We introduced a system that got jammed when it was supposed to collect the data. And indeed, and so we switched quickly to the alternative, which is manual collation. But the speed with which you had to collate that data is important if you want to go to court. As you know, electoral disputes are allowed, but then within a certain period, you need to get that information.
So your system was jammed? The
system, from what we got jammed, or, well, failed to continue working, if you want me to put it that way. And therefore, we couldn't depend on electronic data. So we had to switch to the manual collation, and it takes a lot of time in doing that. And indeed, it wasn't complete before we had to meet the constitutional time limit for going to court. That, I think, basically that's the
so at the time the NDC was in court, did you have the full complement of the 2020 election results?
If you had our outgoing chairman, we had some information. It wasn't 100%, but we had quite a lot of information collected, electoral results collected and collated. And therefore, yes, we had something, but it needed to be completed for us to make a case. But then, as has been explained, of course, the Electoral Commission itself was presenting different figures. And so we wanted to probe whether they actually, were very competent in producing those figures that they kept changing. And so they needed to present their information to us in court.
Do you take responsibility as the immediate past director of research, together with your other colleagues who were executives of the party, for failing your grassroots in terms of the coalition of the results?
No, that's a systems problem. It's not a research problem. It's a systems problem because you needed to introduce processes and systems that would bring in data. Election day data management is completely different, as you do in your election management processes. Because you need to get the information in as quickly as possible so you can call the elections for those who you think have made it. And that's a very fast process. Indeed, I know Joy FM tries to outdo many of the other stations. Right. So that requires systems that are efficient and competent to generate the data that you need so you can then call the elections. That was a problem we have. It wasn't that we didn't know. Of course, we had mapped the entire country. We had the data on voter population, voter size, and then even we had information on the voting process itself, because then we had people collecting.
But what you were not confident about was the fact that you had either won the election or there was supposed to be a runoff.
From the data that we saw, it was clear that we were in the lead.
With which figures?
With figures that were collected, because
which you didn't do independently.
Listen, in collecting electoral data, you can make conclusive statements. If you collect a certain ratio, a certain threshold, you can do that. You can. If the remaining, if it's not significant, you can determine whether you won or not, because you're not going to get 100%. It depends on the margin of error and indeed the